Good morning. How is everybody? Did you have your coffee? Yes? Okay. Did you have your beer? Good. Very good. Very good. I'm here today to talk to you about how us, the testers, can bring value to any organization that we work for, but especially how that work that we're doing can also help improve our own selves. I just have to mention that my opinions are my own and that everything I'm going to talk about is based on my 15+ year experience being a tester, all kinds of testers. So I've done from manual testing to mobile testing to automation testing, everything you can imagine, I've been through that. And I've picked some of the things that I think are very important for us as testers. Some of those things might be obvious, some of those things maybe not, but let's see. I'm going to start off with an image that I took at an airport, which shows two of my favorite airplanes ever. Basically, these are probably the largest airplanes built by these two manufacturers. We have the Boeing 747 in front, and in the back is the Airbus A380. What's particular about these two airplanes is that they are made up of millions of parts. So if you think about that airplane, which can seat around 500 people, it's made up of all kinds of small pieces and larger pieces and so on. What do they all have in common? All of those pieces need to be tightly, fit together. They need to be properly fitted so that the airplane works properly and that they take us from one place to the other safely. Every single little piece is very important. Nothing is not important when it comes to building a plane. And similarly, in an organization, and an organization means any company that we work for, the smaller parts that make up the entire organization are us, the people who work for that organization. Every single one of us needs to contribute to the success of the organization. If we don't, well, there's a few things that are going to happen. By the way, these are the teams. So in case you didn't realize, these are, let's say, Scrum teams. So a while ago, I started a series of comics, and these were the characters in the comics. We had the tester, we had the developers, Scrum Master, product owners, and so on and so on. Everybody needs to work together in order for the product to be successful or the company to be successful. What is the big picture and how it works? Again, this is probably obvious, but let's just go through this. So we have people who are making up teams, who work on products. The company itself is relying on us to build a product, which is going to be shipped to the customers. Now, what happens if the product that we're delivering is not good? If it lacks in quality, if it's slow, if it's, let's say, ugly, if it's unusable by the customers. The customers will not be happy with our product. So instead of them spending money on our product, they will go and spend their money elsewhere, and we will not benefit from their money. How does their money come to play when it comes to us? Well, we get paid, we have a salary, right? So if our product doesn't deliver the quality that the customers expect, we might not get a salary. In some companies, when they are really successful, they also like to give out bonuses to the people working in the company. So it's in our interest for the company to make a lot of money, so we can get a little share of that money, right? So we must be realistic. This is basically how it works. But us as testers, how can we contribute to the success of the company? Well, there's a few things. So the first thing that needs that we need to realize is that each company probably has a different set of roles and responsibilities for a tester. So if you want to get hired at a company, you might be required to be a sort of a full stack tester. So you might need to be able to do automation, manual testing, blah, 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 and so on. Other companies have other sets of requirements. For example, on certain projects that I worked on, we had dedicated manual testers who only did manual work, and we had dedicated automation testers. We had dedicated security experts and dedicated performance testing experts. So this really depends on the company you work for. Either way, apart from these roles and responsibilities that we have, which we know when we get hired, we can also contribute with our personal experience of using similar products or similar chunks of the product. Because, for example, let's say login. Login is something we are all using, no matter what app or software piece we are using. Everybody's using login. So we have an experience with how we prefer to log in, what is the easiest way for us to log in. Also for recovering your password, we have experience on how we prefer to recover our password, which is the most effective way for us to do it, and which is the safest way for us to do it. So this experience we can bring into the company, and we can help refine the product that we work on. Also, we have product experience. So once we work in a company for many years, we know more and more and more about the products that we are building. We might even switch from one project to another, so we accumulate even more experience, so that when it comes to things like that I'm going to discuss, like defining requirements or testing the product, we have more background and we can provide even more input when we're doing our day-to-day work. We also come with our personal traits. So when we're testing, it's every one of us who is testing, right? We can also simulate the customers, but we can also look at it from our perspective. And if there's one thing I know about testers is that we are very creative. So we can bring our creativity and provide input to how we can enhance the product simply by being us and using our own creativity. Now, I want to emphasize one thing. Our role is not to break the software. I know that many testers like to say, I'm coming to work because I want to break the product. I want to find 1,000 bugs. I want to show the developers that they did such a bad job. Well, think about it this way. What if all your developers did a crappy job so that when you come to work today, you find 1,000 bugs? What does that mean for the quality of the product? That simply means you cannot release the product. Because with 1,000 bugs, nobody will use the product. Even the business won't allow you to do a release with that kind of a product because, it's going to look really, really bad on them. So you should be more interested in not having bad software that you're testing. Because if you have bad software, customers are not going to use the software, you are not going to get paid. So that's, again, that circle that I was talking about. So our interest is to help achieve and improve the quality, to come with our knowledge and our experience to enhance the product and the product quality instead of just, waiting for the worst product ever to test, right? We can take some measures and we can help avoid getting to the point where when we see the product for the first time, not even the first click works, right? So let's see how we can do that. What are the things we can contribute with and where do we start? It all starts with defining the requirements for a product. So business owners, stakeholders, right, people who own companies, they want products to be built. They talk to your product owners, business analysts, whatever they are. To me, they're like similar because they're fulfilling kind of the same role. And they're telling the product owners, we want to build a product, right? Product owners then take this desire of the business owners and translate that to high-level requirements. Sometimes those requirements are not that clear. They don't really know what they want, or they don't know exactly what it looks like. They have a kind of a vague idea. So usually in, let's say, Scrum teams, you have meetings like groomings and other such story refinement discussions where you can look at what the requirement is. And that is the first moment when you can come and tell the product owner, look, these requirements, okay, we kind of understand what you want to build, but, and you can come with all your opinions and all your experience to tell them how to refine the requirements so that you can actually build a product that would be useful for the customers. So the first moment where you can actually touch and improve the quality of the product is at that step where the requirements are still being refined. You can participate in those meetings and have your voice heard. And this is very important. No question is stupid. No question is too small. Maybe if you're thinking about certain things that you are not expressing, others are doing the same. So at the end of the meeting, you are left with that unanswered question, you and your colleagues, and the product just goes on, and it might have been a valid question. It might have changed the way the product is implemented. But because you didn't ask it at that point, at some point it's just too late to ask these questions once you've already started doing the development. So make sure you provide as much input and you show as much curiosity as you can when you are in these requirement defining meetings. Once you've sorted out the requirements and it's pretty clear what the product needs to be, developers might have some technical discussions. It's not always the case. So sometimes it's pretty straightforward what they will be building, and they know exactly how to build it, and maybe it's not that much of a big deal, or it's not like a huge architecture change or architecture implementation. But in some cases, they do have these technical discussions where they choose, for example, let's say the cache mechanism that they will use. This is just one example. Your presence in such meetings is very useful for two reasons. One, again, you can ask about the architecture. You can challenge the architecture based on your experience of how the product is supposed to look or to work. Similarly, by being present in this meeting, you can actually gather information yourself so that you can create test cases or understand exactly what testing you need to perform for that particular piece of software. I'm going to give you a personal example. Some while back, I was working in a company where we were supposed to release the product, I think, on Tuesday. On Friday was the first time I actually saw the implementation. I was not consulted about architecture, use cases, anything like that. So on Friday, when I got the product that I started testing, I realized that we had a set of flows that were not even considered by the development. So it was like a branch where you had all kinds of user behaviors that nobody thought about. So on Friday, we pulled out the whiteboard and we started drawing a new architecture for that implementation. And they had to redo the entire architecture because they didn't realize of all of these flows where the user could go by using that application. And it was really risky because we almost didn't deliver on time simply because nobody asked the testing team, you know, is there anything we've missed? Is there anything we need to consider, right? This was a very, you know, it was a moment of, you know, kind of change. And ever since that point, testing was always involved in even these technical discussions because it's helpful for everybody. And as I said, you can ask questions, you can get more clarity about what is going to be implemented and how you're supposed to be testing the new product. Also, one other aspect is adding testability. So for example, you know, if you're doing UI, sometimes you have these elements that you need to interact with, and sometimes those selectors are really difficult to use. In such meetings, you can actually address the fact that you need testability included in the product, so that you need certain handles that you can use for making your testing much easier, right? Developers, once they are aware of these things, can implement these for you, as long as they are open-minded. And usually they are if you provide the reason for which you need certain things to be implemented. Every time you start working on a user story and every time you start testing something, make sure you have the clear requirements. Usually, we would have something like, before we start development and testing, of course, but before we start development, we need to make sure we have clear requirements. Sometimes the developers are not going to say anything because for them it's like, yeah, I'm just going to implement what's there, you know, I'm good with that. But if you as the tester realize that there are, you know, uncertainties regarding the requirements, that something is not clear, make sure you raise this as soon as you can. And if you do this, and if the requirements will change, also make sure that the changes are reflected in the requirements. So if there's a change of scope, for example, acceptance criteria 4 is changed to something else, make sure the user story is always up to date, so that when you start testing, your reference is the actual requirements, not some discussion you had or some note somewhere in a page on Confluence. The user stories in, let's say, Jira should be your go-to documentation for what you're supposed to test and for how the product is supposed to look. And when you think about it, who writes the most complex requirements for a product? The testers, because product owners are going to give you, let's say, again, a high level or as much information as they can regarding what the product is supposed to look like. But when we start doing our testing, we are going to write all the test scenarios, one way or another, whether it's manual test cases or automation. We are going to, let's say, map the entire requirements into our test cases. It happens to me a lot of times that we work on a feature, we have the requirements written by the product owners, And some months later, a product owner comes to me and says, do you remember for this particular feature how this particular flow is supposed to work? And if I don't remember right then, I'm going to say, hang on, I'm looking into my test case repository, and I'm going to tell you exactly how the product is supposed to work. So we're the keepers of the most complex requirements that we have for our product, and this is very useful. What happens if somebody is implementing something, and when you start testing, you realize, well, we didn't really meet the requirements? This can be due to two issues. Either one, and this is the saddest one, developers simply didn't feel like implementing what was there because it was too complicated, or they just, they said, it's fine like this. The second issue is that sometimes the requirements are clear. Even if you're discussing in technical meetings, you know what you need to build. But when you are there and you start actually working as a developer on the implementation, you realize you have some limitations. That is the part where you need to discuss with the product owner whether the new behavior, which is impacted by some technical issues, is acceptable or not. For the first case, where the developer was just simply too lazy to do the right job, again, you need to challenge this. Is this really what we want? And it's up to the product owner to decide whether we want to keep the product as it was built right now and update the requirements so that it reflects the new behavior or not. If not, well, there will be another set of development work, and once that's done, we can actually test the product as it's supposed to be. But never just leave it to chance. If you see that something is not according to requirements, always raise this with the product owners. They need to have visibility over what is being developed because they have that understanding that what is in the requirements will be developed. And unless they know that that's not the case, they might have surprises in production. And in some cases, product owners are also involved in demos, or they are involved in walkthroughs with the testers. So sometimes we have to discuss with the product owners to show them how the product behaves. And that's really good. That means we are communicating with them. Don't be afraid to do that. I really encourage you to have this discussion with the product owners to show them the end product. And maybe convince them to also do the sprint end demo. Because demos are usually something that testers are doing. And sometimes it gets boring, at least for me. It used to get boring at some point. That every end of the sprint, we had a meeting where we had to show off the product. And I was the only one who was doing the demos. When instead, sometimes it's the role of the product owner because they know best what they actually asked for the team to develop. So they can walk whoever is in the meeting through better than maybe we can. Preventing bugs. So as I said, let's not find bugs. Let's try to prevent them. We can help achieve this by suggesting data input validation. So we can suggest to developers that when they're implementing the UI doesn't allow, for example, doesn't allow special characters that are not allowed in the backend to pass into the backend. So we can have UI level validations that we can suggest and we can discuss with developers. Also, we can suggest that the same data should be rejected by the backend. So this should be a discussion with the developers to make sure we don't find those really nasty situations where certain data that wasn't supposed to get into the system actually gets there. Prevent rather than find out what a catastrophe it can be to have this invalid data get to our actual systems. Why should we actually prevent the bugs, by the way? Well, as I said, if we have bugs in the system, we are not going to release the software. I did a meetup a few years ago where we discussed about the roles of the tester and so on. And somebody said, if I come to work and I don't find 50 bugs during that day, I'm not feeling okay. I am not happy. And that kind of scared me a little bit because, I don't know how many bugs you've created during your career, but I've created thousands of bug reports, thousands. That means starting with, the steps to reproduce expected actual, finding the screenshots, the logs, blah, 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 finding all the details that I need to put into the defect, discussing, blah, blah, blah. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of time to create a defect. I would rather not have defects. I would rather spend my time doing something else, something more fun, than constantly having to create the defects and to justify them and to see in which environment they reproduce and so on and so on. So how happy would we be without bugs? Somebody would be happy. Is there anybody here who wouldn't be happy if we didn't have any bugs? Think about it. So as I said, bugs means we cannot release the product, which means maybe we won't get that paycheck. Very important. But the idea is that our role is not to break the software. So it's not just about going and finding bugs and stuff. We can prevent the bugs and we can help improve quality because there are so many other things that we can do, and there's so many other aspects to quality than just the bug. And automation is something that, maybe some of us are doing. How many of us are doing automation? So quite let's say half of us are doing automation, right? But automation is not just about testing. So we have automation in many other things. We have automated deployments. We have automated metric validations. For example, after you're deploying something, you have certain software that can check whether the system is healthy, whether there's logs on certain machines that are in the load balancer and so on. So there's automation everywhere around us. Having automation in testing is something that we can contribute. We can do UI automation, we can do backend automation, we can do mobile automation. And the actual purpose of automation is to help releases happen. Because if you're releasing a product, if you released the first product 5 years ago, and you keep releasing and releasing and releasing, after 5 years, it's not really sustainable to have somebody manually recheck that functionality that you released 5 years ago, plus 4 years ago, plus 3 years ago, because you get to a really large number of things that you need to manually check. And it's time consuming. And if you have to redo the same tests on various environments previous to the releases are going to be delayed substantially, or you need quite, as you say, it takes a village. So you need quite a lot of people to actually manually test all of those features. So automation can help you with retesting something that was released a very long time ago without you having to even look at the actual feature. What's important is you do reliable automation. So that's the secret. When you're doing automation, you need to make sure you can count on it. You just need to go and look at the results. If the result says fail, then the automation should be so reliable that the only failures come from either an environment issue or an actual bug, not from test flakiness. And if you're doing UI automation with Selenium, for example, you might hear that word a lot, flakiness. Well, you can write UI automation which is not flaky. And, for those of you who subscribe to my workshop tomorrow, I'm going to show you how. Yeah. But the idea is, as I said, when you're doing automation, make sure it's reliable and make sure you spend all the time you need to write that reliable automation. I know that when you're working in Scrum, you're kind of pushed to finish your tasks by a certain time, right? You take a task into a sprint and you're told you have to finish by the end of the sprint because you took the task into the sprint and you said you would finish it, right? Nobody really thinks as estimations or guesses. Everybody's like, you committed to this, you have to finish it by the end of the sprint, right? And when this happens, in many cases, we don't spend all the time we need on looking at whether the tests are reliable, on running those tests as much as we're supposed to, on tweaking the tests if we find any issues. We just close the task and we hope we're going to come back to that test at some point and fix it, which never happens. And this just goes on and on and on, sprint after sprint, and at some point you find yourself with a lot of automated tests that you cannot rely on because they are so flaky you cannot count on the failure being an actual failure or not. So think about this. Spend the time you need in order to write the best version of that test case, or sorry, of that automation scenario as you need. Don't cut corners. It's very important on the long run. And another kind of automation task that you can take on, apart from your regular UI and backend and mobile testing, is security testing. So some companies have dedicated security teams that do their entire validation of the product, but they are not always available to test your product when you need to release. So sometimes there's like a backlog even for them, and they come to your feature when they have the time. However, if you include some, at least the basic, most important scenarios for security in your automation, you can actually run those tests as part of your regression testing previous to a release. So you have certain scenarios you can find on the OWASP site. It's like the top 7, top 10 most critical vulnerabilities of each year. And for many of those, you can do either UI or backend automation, but UI automation for sure. And once you have those tests, just put them in the regression and run them whenever you want to. And it gives you an extra confidence that your product is going to work properly and that you won't have any security issues, faster than waiting for a team to actually do the validation. And it's the same with performance testing. So you can also do some performance testing. You don't necessarily need to write all of the scripts. Sometimes you already have scripts available that some other people wrote. And what you can do from time to time is just start them and maybe yourself look at the reports, or have somebody from the performance team take a look and analyze the results. In other cases, having these performance tests run, performance, stress tests, and so on, run in your test environment can uncover certain bugs that only happen when there is a high load in the system. So if we think about our test environments, even if we are 10 teams working in the same environment, sometimes we don't have enough load generated to uncover certain bugs. So running just clicking that green button which starts performance testing can help uncover some of those bugs and actually make your testing, or have your testing done in a more production-like environment where certain things are happening, like all kinds of transactions going on at the same time. Accessibility testing is also something you can contribute with. It's becoming more and more important, and more companies are focused on actually doing accessibility. This is providing the same functionality to people with different kinds of disabilities. And even if you think that maybe your product is not going to be used by someone with disabilities, you might be surprised that that actually happens. So spend some time looking at these accessibility items. There's also all kinds of plugins you can use that you can just run on a certain page, and they will give you the information where you need to improve your pages to allow for accessibility. So it's really simple to just run that query, pull up a report, send it to your product owner, explain that there is value in actually implementing accessibility and helping even more people use our product than not doing it. Another task that we can contribute with is coordinating releases. Because I found that in many cases when a tester coordinates the release, certain things are not being missed. And what are the things I would do if I were conducting these releases would be to, first of all, make sure that we're only going into production with what we agreed to go into production with. This helps, or this is something we can highlight by looking at the release notes and at the documentation where we said, okay, in this sprint, we are going to deliver this. I did find at some point that we were trying to release to production something that wasn't tested and something that wasn't supposed to go into the release at all. So by doing these checks, you can actually make sure that you validate and that you contribute to the quality by not pushing into production anything that's not supposed to be there, right? Just do a visual inspection and compare the release notes with the list of user stories you're supposed to put into production, and that's going to be very useful. And if you're doing this early, then you don't have to change anything on once you have already deployed stuff. So when the branch or the build is being done, that is the moment where you can take a look at this documentation versus release notes. And because you're coordinating a release, you know exactly how much time, or well, you know roughly how much time you would need for testing the release, whether it's 3 days or 3 weeks. And you can actually lobby for getting enough time to do the release. Also, I kind of like the discipline part of doing a release, and I'm crazy for checklists and to-dos and so on. So when I would coordinate a release, I would make sure that people are there on time, that we start on time, that we have a certain communication on the Slack channels, like starting in 10 minutes, starting now, who's doing what, everybody communicates so that there is a lot of visibility regarding the releases. Also, I want to make sure that everybody knows their role, because there were some cases when we were doing releases and we either had someone from DevOps or we had a developer who would push or would start the deployment and monitor what is going on. But when people didn't know who that person is, we wasted a lot of time. And as you know, production releases are kind of time boxed, so you need to start at a certain hour so that you don't impact the customer's experiences. So a tester is very, very good at doing these the coordination of releases, especially because we know really well what needs to go into the release. So we can keep an eye on whether we're releasing the right product and whether we have the right approach and we're following the right process to do this release. And a very important source of information for our product is the customer ticket. Looking at tickets that the customers raise can help us figure out whether what we're building is useful for them, whether they like it, whether we need to implement some sort of help documentation so that they can know how to use it. Because I found that in many cases we're releasing something that if we, the testers, didn't look at the requirements, we wouldn't know how to use ourselves. And we are the ones who are actually providing the product. So if we don't know how to use the product, how would the customer know how to use the product? So customer tickets can tell you a lot of things, whether the product is really slow, whether we need to improve messaging, or we need to add some sort of FAQs, or all kinds of information. Once we look at those tickets, we can actually create, or we can talk to the product owners and business analysts to have those tickets created where we are addressing the feedback from the customers and make sure that we implement the functionality based on the customer feedback as soon as possible, because it's going to bring value to the customers and they will be happier, and again, they will use our product more. And try to stay close to development. Try to stay close to the developers, because you can learn a lot of things from them. You can see how they think about implementing features, about picking certain tools, and you can actually see the code that they're writing, and that can give you some tips on how to write your own code. I've worked with a lot of developers. Some of them were brilliant, and if you find those brilliant developers in your team, stay close to them. You can learn so many things. You can shape your thinking based on how they're doing it. I've done that a lot. So because I'm doing a lot of automation, it really helped me to see how they were using certain libraries to write less code, for example. How they would think about approaching a new product, or how that would help me to start, let's say, a new project for testing a product. A lot of information can be learned by the developers as long as you find some really, really good developers. And usually those are the ones who are willing to help you and who sometimes come to you with all kinds of ideas and suggestions for improvements, right? And don't hesitate to include them in code reviews if you're doing automation, and also to look at their code reviews. Code reviews are a source of learning. They can help you improve what you're doing, and you can see different things that you might not have considered. For example, if you're looking at the developers' code reviews and at the comments that are left on the code reviews, there's a lot of information to learn from there. Even if you don't understand all the code they're writing, you might understand just enough to help you write your own automation. And always provide clarity when you're raising bugs or when you're reporting a problem. Because in so many cases, developers don't trust testers because either we create a bug report for something that's not an actual bug, or we create a bug report where we've seen a behavior once, or we think we've seen it once, we haven't seen it the second or the third time, we don't have much information. And when you go to a developer and tell them, look, this is probably a bug, I saw it once, I cannot reproduce it, I don't have any evidence, they're going to say, get out of here, this is not a bug, let's do something else, let's not bother with this. So when you're reporting the bug, make sure you have exact information. What steps did you use to reproduce it? What evidence do you have? Logs are gold. So if you have any information from the logs, provide them to the developers, because once they see an exception like this in the logs, they're going to say, yes, you're right, it's a bug. I had a situation at one point, it was early in my career, where we had a developer that no tester wanted to go and talk to. Whenever they would find a bug that came from the work of that developer, they were scared to go and talk to the guy. The guy was so dismissive of every tester in the team that they just didn't want to talk to him. And once it was my turn, I found the bug. And one of my colleagues said, oh, that guy, oh my God, it's going to be so difficult to convince him and blah, blah. And I just went into his office and I showed him exactly what the bug was. I had previously created the bug report, sent it to him before I actually arrived in his office. And when I got there, he looked at we had the mobile phone and we were testing mobile. And he was looking at it and he said, "Ah, interesting. Let me take a look at the code." And then he's like, "Oh, but if you try this, okay, let me see. Oh, yeah, I found a problem. Oh, awesome. Perfect. I'm going to fix it and I'll let you know." And I was like, what did just happen? You know, like, this is the guy who didn't, like, he was, how we say, the spy of others. So he was the scariest thing to any other tester. But when I went and talked to him, it was like, and the trick was that the bug description was so clear and I had so much evidence there that he couldn't deny that it's a bug. It was really clear to him that, yes, he has to look at the code and yes, there is a problem, which he wasn't used to because other testers didn't have this kind of bugs. There were many cases when they were reporting bugs that weren't really bugs. And it's really important for us, you know, to make sure that our craft as a testers are, you know, is taking into account and that we as testers are seen as somebody who actually knows their craft. It's very important for us to do the right job, to have quality work, even when we are doing testing, even when we're creating bug reports. Basically, we need to also provide quality ourselves in all of the work that we do. And as I said, lobby for QA. Make sure people know about QA. Make sure people know what the tester does, what are all of the things that we do, what are all of the things that we can contribute to the product. I've seen many cases where testers have been dismissed. They were reporting issues, they were complaining about things that weren't done properly, and nobody listened to them. They were just, you know, I had a case where I was at a conference and somebody came to me and she said, "I don't know what to do. These people are not listening to me. I come with valid bugs. I tell them all the information they need and they still dismiss me because I'm the tester. What can I do?" And I told him I told her one simple thing: quit your job. Because you don't want to be in an environment where you as a tester cry at work because nobody takes you seriously when you have valid points. As testers, we have a responsibility to provide quality, right? If the company that we work for doesn't understand our role there, well, let's just go and find a job where somebody understands what we are capable of doing and how we can contribute and how valuable we are as testers and as people, okay? So keep that in mind. Make sure we provide the visibility of what we do and make sure our voice is heard. And one very important thing is, you know, we have these appraisals, we have the reviews that are happening from time to time. Make sure you show as much of what you've done in the last 6 months, a year, when it comes to those appraisals. Advertise yourself, sell yourself, tell everybody how amazing you were during the last 6 months, a year, so that they know. Make sure you don't leave anything out. In many cases, we have these reviews where we're not properly evaluated because certain people who are doing the evaluation don't know much about us. Make sure they do. Make sure you tell them everything and all of the things that you have done which contributed to the quality and to the success of the company when it comes to these reviews. Don't let anybody say you didn't do a good job. Prove that you did. And try different things. Don't just be happy with doing one thing for 7 years or 10 years and so on. Try to enhance what you're doing. Try different things. As I've mentioned, there's so many things you can try: security testing, performance testing, releases, and so on. Try various things just so you know, maybe you don't realize how much you would love to do something else or something else as well. Once you're going to different phases of development and once you are participating in different activities when it comes to development, you have a broader view and a broader understanding of all the things you can do, and it can help you. Learning new things always helps you. You never know when a job comes along at a dream company of yours that would require certain skills for you to have that you didn't have previously, and you wouldn't have had if you didn't have the curiosity to try some other things as well. The more you learn, the more you have opportunities to be hired at certain key roles and at certain companies. And that is what you get out of it. The more knowledge you gain and the more activities you contribute with, the more you are able to tackle different projects. So you can move from a project that you might be sick of because you've been there for quite a long time to a more challenging product, or to a more maybe technical product, or to a product where you need to perform certain other tasks. The more you learn, the better. You don't need to learn everything about an area. For example, you don't need to be the expert in performance, but it's good for you to know about it and to have, let's say, a basic set of skills, because it's going to help you in the long run. And it can also help you with, getting more, more bonuses and, maybe a different position in the company. And as I said, maybe even a different job, which is a bit more, better paid, or, where you can just contribute with much more than you're contributing at the moment. And make sure you don't burn out, because I know that at least, at the beginning of your career, you are so interested in testing and you love it and you want to do testing all the time and so on. But in some cases, people just do too much. And at one point, you just get to that burnout phase. Trust me, burnout is real. It exists, been there, okay? So it's really important to take breaks. It's really important to go on holidays. Even if you're not going anywhere, just take some time off where you clear your cache of all the things at work. Sometimes when you're in this momentum of working, you don't even realize that you're becoming exhausted. And when you take a break, you're like, okay, it's day 2 of my holiday. I still am in that mood of like, I'm still trying to push and release and get to the sprint deadline and so on. So when you take the break, you realize that you actually need the break. You need to slow down. You need to take your time and focus on other things and focus on yourself. It's so important to focus on yourself. Many companies would expect you, for example, to do more like overtime, a lot of overtime. Sometimes overtime happens because, there's issues. Sometimes we just need to contribute and we need to help out. But that shouldn't be your day-to-day work. You shouldn't work every day more than your allocated time, because that leads to you getting fatigued, and that's going to lead you to something even worse. That burnout, as I said, is real and is really difficult to get out of, okay? So take holidays, travel, garden, bake, whatever makes you happy. Just do something that is not work for a change. And I don't want to hear about people who have like 40 or 50 days off because they haven't been on holiday for 2 years. Nobody should do that. Take your holidays. Go do something fun, okay? So to wrap this up, what was I actually trying to do? I was trying to kind of encourage you to try different aspects, to learn, to constantly learn, because there's so many things that are really interesting to do. So many aspects we can contribute with in our testing. I am particularly a fan of the work that developers do, and I'm particularly interested in tech stuff. So I always try to find ways to improve my work. I'm doing automation, so my role at this time is full automation, right? I'm always interested in certain tasks that are given to us, for example, to be done automatically. So to find a way to in an automated fashion, do the work I'm otherwise supposed to do. And that leads me to finding all kinds of new APIs that I'm looking at. I'm trying to write all kinds of codes that generate all kinds of reports and scripts and so on and so on. So there's a world out there that we can explore. There's so much in the IT world that we can look into, and so many interesting things that we can do. But don't forget to take care of yourself. You are the most important person to you, especially, right? It all starts with you. The company cannot benefit from you or from your work if you are burnt out or if you are not the best version of yourself. But as I said, especially for you, make sure you are taken care of. Physically, mentally, from a challenge perspective, and so on. Make sure you're doing a good job. Aim high, because that's usually how you progress. Always aim high. Always set high challenges for yourself and work towards getting there. Work hard. I know it sounds maybe as a cliche, but work hard, because working hard actually has a lot of benefits. One of those is, for example, for me, standing on this stage and trying to encourage you to be better and better and better and better. Not that you're not best or the best or so, like the best version that you can be, but there's always a step extra. So you can always aim a bit higher and always be amazing. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Corina. Okay, guys, please, can we have a Slido on the Maybe there will be some questions. We will see. Okay, so no more, no questions so far. So please find this at slido.com. It's BRX 2023 Tech, or scan the QR code to ask questions, or you can ask questions here in auditorium. I will go to you with my microphone. Any questions? I see many people scanning the QR code, so no questions.
Clear as daylight.
Okay, there is one question here, so.
Is there anything you regret within your career as a tester?
Anything I regret? Yes, there is one thing I regret. I regret not quitting a job earlier than when I did, because I didn't realize how toxic that workplace was for me at the time. It was always about competition between team members. It was always like we were kind of encouraged to be competing against each other instead of communicating with each other, instead of collaborating. And it came to a point where it was really exhausting. And we were also being pushed to always work hard and do things and do fast and stuff like that. So it was a pace that was really unhealthy, both for us and for the product. So when I quit that job, I did it because I just got a better offer, which sounded interesting, and I had been there for a long time. But it took me months to kind of settle down from that rhythm in which I was used to be to what is actually normal. So that is probably one of my regrets. Otherwise, no. I'm happy that I'm doing what I'm doing, and that I have a lot of opportunities, and that in IT there's so many things for us to do, so many tasks, so many different projects, so many different interesting domains we can work in. So I think we're all blessed to be in this domain, so to say.
Okay, there is one question from Auditarian, and then we will go to the Slido, because we have a lot of questions there.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. I really love that you emphasize the part to kind of praise ourselves. I think this is very, very important for us. So can you maybe practically share your practical tips and tricks? How do you praise yourself?
Yes.
Like daily basis, or give us some of your secrets.
Yeah, so sometimes I do things which I find are awesome, or the end result is really awesome. It's not always when I do that, but sometimes maybe I find the most intricate bug there is that nobody else found, or I'm doing a task that visibly helps in certain aspects. What I would do is I have a document where I would write down some of those things that I find are useful, because in hindsight you always forget. Like, even if you're complaining about something today, 2 weeks from now, when you have a discussion with the manager, they ask, so what's wrong? What happened? You're like, I don't remember, I'm fine now, So write things down, and when you have the opportunity, just shout it out, or when you're at the stand-ups, we have the stand-ups where people say what you've been doing and so on. Just let people know what you've done. Just make sure you emphasize what you've done. Don't be ashamed to do that. It's important. It's useful for us, and I think it's the way we're supposed to do things. Everybody does that. Everybody talks about themselves. Let's also do that, and let's make sure people see how much we can contribute and how much we're actually contributing with.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Now we have Slido questions. What tool are you using for automation?
So I have let's say a toolkit that I'm generally using. So my IDE, so for my code editor, is IntelliJ. It's really, really, really good because it helps with a lot of auto-completion, code analysis, and so on. My projects are usually Maven projects because it's really easy to build a new project, to have the correct structure already built for you with just a simple command. For backend, I'm using Rest Assured. My programming language is Java, so Rest Assured is really good for API testing. For UI testing, I use Selenium a lot. And for mobile, I would use Appium when I would do any mobile testing. So I'm mostly focused on doing UI automation. That's why people hire me these days, to either create new automation or to fix automation that isn't necessarily working. So Selenium is my go-to tool.
Okay, next question is from Peter G. Any tips for selling testing and be more visible in the company?
Brag about what you're doing. So let people know like you have so many forums in which you can talk about your achievements. You have your stand-ups, you have your planning meetings, you have your grooming meetings, any meeting or any moment when you are surrounded by multiple people and key people, like product owners, project managers, your boss, and so on, talk about the things that you've done. Just communicate all the things that you have been doing and how important it is that you have done those things. So try to emphasize on the benefit of the things that you have done.
Okay, next question. How to find time for improvement when project deadlines does not leave you with free time?
I have a few things here. So if you're working in Scrum, sometimes at the beginning of the sprint, you have 1 or 2 days when there is no development work ready for you to test. Sometimes. Whenever that happens, I usually have kind of a backlog of things that I would like to do. So either I create an epic and I create some user stories under that epic, or I just create random user stories depending on what work I want to do. If I have an epic with a lot of user stories, for example, for improving automation, when I have those first 2 days in the sprint available, I would just drag one of those items into the sprint and I would work on it. And that would be, that would be a good contribution from me, because then I actually worked on improving the quality and I actually had the time to do that instead of wasting time on doing something else. So always have like a backlog available and use that times, as we say, so use those times when there is nothing to test to work on these items that you would like to work on.
Okay, and the last questions. How do you get out of burnout?
How do you get out of burnout? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Take time off. Do something you love in your spare time. Make sure you impose limits. So what I did was, at one point I decided that once I close my laptop, so let's say I work from 8 to 4, right? When 4 comes, well, I'm not going to close the laptop at 4, but 4 and a few minutes after, when I close the laptop, that's when I stop thinking about work. From there on, there is no point during the day when I think about work. I'm only thinking about work within those hours that I have to work. If I constantly think about work during the day, I cannot focus on myself, I cannot focus on my family, I cannot focus on doing the things that I love. And apart from that, make sure that during your spare time, you do some other things. As I said, garden, bake, travel, whatever makes you happy. Make sure you take time off. Make sure you do other things that are not stressing you. Getting out of burnout is not a fast process. So it's not like, you switched off and that's it. It takes a bit more time to heal, but start doing it, as I said, not focusing on work when you're not supposed to do that. Don't do that overtime. Say no to things. Make sure you don't get called during the evenings, right? Make sure you let people know you're not available outside of working hours, unless you have a contract that says that you're supposed to do that. And just do things that you like. Discover hobbies. And don't just look at your phone every day, go out. There's so much to explore in this world. And going out and seeing new things is going to help you a lot with recovering from this burnout.
Okay, I think if you have any other questions, Corina will be here with us during the conference, so you can reach her and ask. I think she will be glad to answer. So one more big applause for Corina and her keynote.
Thank you.